Hey everybody, Zee Garcia here. Today we're going to be building up our gardens, scoring victory points, and trying to attract the most bees in Queenz. In this game, the players begin with a blank slate and a gorgeous garden in the center of the table from which they're going to be drafting flowers. Once they've got some of those flowers, they'll start building their gardens. And you are going to do so by drafting these pentamino shapes into your garden, placing them next to each other, and scoring flowers as long as you are placing groups of the same color next to each other. It's a very simple game, it's a highly tactical game, and certainly a good-looking game. We're going to go ahead and take a look at how it works. I'll come on back after that. I'll tell you what I think of it. Here's what the game looks like set up for 3 players. The objective of the game is to get the most victory points possible, and players are going to be doing that by building up their gardens using these shapes here and the flowers that you see in the center of the table. Depending on how large those groups are, they're going to be scoring victory points, and at the end of the game, they're also going to score victory points based on the bees that are placed around their hives. So, to set up the game, we've given every player a little board, and you've got the 5 honey pots in the different colors and 3 of the hives, and then we've randomized the board. We're going to say that player will be our start player, so the one before them counterclockwise will place this character here anywhere they'd like on the outside of the board, making sure they are facing the correct way. This character will move counterclockwise, around the board. And then we're ready to commence the game. So, on your turn, you are going to either grab some of the flowers on the board or use one of these, draft it, and deploy flowers onto it, completely covering it. If you've already got something in play, then any further ones you take must be adjacent to it somehow, however you'd like, in whatever configuration you'd like. And so that player is going to begin, like I said. On your turn, you can, if they choose to take, and they will because they have no flowers, they can do one of 3 things. They can take 3 flowers from here, making sure they are all different colors and they have no bees. So they could take this flower, this one, and this one, and they will put that in their reserve. They have space for 6 flowers, as you can see there, and then they are going to move the character 3 spaces because they took 3 flowers. 1, 2, 3. And then the next player would go. They'll have the same choice in that line, though as you can see, there's now a flower missing there. So that's fine. 1, 2, 3. It'll be that player's turn, and they can choose to take flowers. They can again take 3 if they are different, or another option is you can take 2 flowers and they cannot have any bees on them, but you could take 2 of the same color. So this player could take 1 red and another red, and place those in their reserve, and then move this character 2, because 2 flowers were taken. It comes back to me, and now I'll explain the last option for taking flowers, which is I can take a single flower, and there are no limitations for that one. So I could take this flower, which features 2 bees on it, and put that in my reserve, and move the character a single space. It'll now go to that player. That player is going to take a single flower as well. They're going to take this one, which is blue and has 2 bees, and they'll move this character once. And it'll come over here. This player is going to take 3 flowers, 1 of each color, no bees. So they will take 1 blue, 1 red, 1 pink, and move this character 1, 2, 3 spaces. So let's say each other player has now taken some flowers. It comes back to this player here, and they choose to deploy flowers onto their garden. They're going to pick one of the shapes available. There are 5 to begin the round, and they are going to place flowers on it. So they're going to do this shape. I'm going to move these things aside just for a second to show you how this works. So they'll begin their garden by doing that, and they're going to place flowers onto each spot however they like. They just have to make sure that they fill up the entire piece. Once they've done that, they're going to score victory points. In this case, they've made a group of 3 red flowers, so they are going to score 3 victory points with their pawn there. If later on they add a piece to this and they grow that group of red flowers by at least 1, then they are going to score 4 victory points for that. So they score it every time as long as they've added at least 1 flower to it. Another thing that happens here is if they've made a group of flowers of a color they have not made before, then they are going to take the matching honey pot and place it here on this track at the top. And what players are attempting to do with that is finish at least one scoring section of each color. And once they've done that, they're going to get the top honey token here and score that many victory points at the end of the game. So whoever does it first is going to get 10 victory points, then 6, 5, and 4 victory points. So of course earlier would be better in that case. The player has right now only made the red because a single flower in blue and a single flower in pink will not score for that player. And they do not move the character when they deploy flowers. That's all they do for that go. Now another option that they have, let's go ahead and switch this up a little bit here. Let's say this player had this blue flower with the two bees on it instead of the blank flower. The other option you have is when you deploy flowers, you may fill one of these spaces on the pentamino with one of your hives. And at the end of the game, you are going to score the bees around the hive 1 point per bee. And that means all 8 spaces around each hive at the end of the game. So you want to worry about where you put those that have bees so that you can control a lot of victory points at the end of the game that way. One final rule when taking one of these tiles, if you take one that has a queen bee, meaning a single large bee on it, you have the option of one time immediately choosing to replace one that's already on your gardens with the new queen bee, and then this one you put in your reserve like that. That allows you a little manipulation for scoring and making large groups, as well as, of course, placing this one possibly around a hive and getting more victory points that way. As you can see, the bed of flowers here, as well as the tokens available, the pieces of garden available, do not replenish immediately while players are taking them. And so, when a player forces this pawn to land on a line that is completely empty already, they are going to score 1 victory point, and then we replenish the entire board. And when a player takes the 5th and last piece of garden, they'll also score 1 victory point and lay out 5 new ones. Also, when a player crosses the red arrow here in the corner, they'll score a victory point and replenish both things in the game. Here's what one player's final area might look like at the end of the game. The game is going to be over when someone gets to 5 pieces making up their garden. Every other player is going to then finish out their round. Even deploying flowers, if they cannot fully complete a tile, it's the only time that rule is broken. And then you've got most of your score by that point, meaning, you know, they've scored all of the flowers. For example, they have a nice area here in pink in which they scored, as you can see the break here in the tiles, 3 victory points the first time. And then upon playing that tile, they scored 6 victory points for that. And the final thing they do is score these hives and their bonus. They completed every color at least once, squeezing in the yellow scoring there at the end. Couldn't do it first, but they did do it second, so they got 6 victory points from that. So they'll score those 6 victory points, and then they score the hives. I like to lay them down after I've done them to make the scoring a little easier. So they're going to score this one, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bees around that one. So they're going to get 5 victory points for that. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this one has 1, 2, 3 around it. Finish out your scoring. Whoever has the highest score is going to be the winner of the game. So that's basically how the game works. Let's go back up top. Let me give you some final thoughts about this one. All right, there it is. So that is Queenz. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Overall, I really enjoy the game. I think it's a wonderfully made family-style game. I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people. Appeals to me. I really enjoy it. That's not to say, though, that it is without flaws. And I'm going to point out a couple of things that I either want to just make you aware of, so that maybe it's, maybe it's something you don't like, and just things I found slightly lacking overall. The 2 things I want to point out are theme. The game is an abstract game, really, with a pasted-on theme. It's a very nice theme, and I like the idea of growing your gardens, putting out your hives, collecting those bees around the hive. I like it. But that theme is going to get pushed to the side by the clearly mechanical concepts at play here. And then the other thing is the replayability. I would say it's a little lower than I would like. It's not bad, but it is, the replayability, it springs forth from really subtle places. You know, you're going to start looking at sort of second tier considerations after a few plays, and that's where you're going to mine your replayability. You know, the first few games, you're considering what you can do for you. I'm going to grab that flower and that flower because it gives me the ability to score this group. Or, oh, I want that one with bees because I want to put it right there. And then after you've played a few times, then you start thinking about not just how to help you, but leave your opponents in a position that is not optimal. Right? Where you leave the character, which dictates how many flowers you take. You want to put it somewhere where your opponent does not have great choices. You want to be the one to replenish the board because you get that freebie points, right? If you think it's worth it, because you are giving the player a brand new board to play with. There's these things that come into play that will help replayability, and they're not apparent right away. At least to me, again. But the replayability overall is a little on the low side because you are largely doing the same thing from game to game. Having said that, everything else I really do enjoy. The aesthetics, fantastic. It's bright, it's colorful, it's beautiful. Components are very nice. The whole thing is going to look great on the table. It's really going to pop. This is an attractive game. This will get people to sit down and play. Game length, it's quick. It's very short, in fact, and it's going to surprise you, I think, the first time you play. And, you know, upon repeat plays, you'll realize how very important every little action you take is. Because there's not a lot of build-up here. It's a game that gets in, makes you make some interesting choices that are all pretty vital, and then boom, it's done and it's out. I like that. The ease of play, very high here. There's, you know, one slightly quirky rule with the queen bee that you can swap out one flower for another. But that's it. Everything else makes sense. It's mechanisms that feel familiar. You know, it's an interesting combination of mechanisms, but nothing is going to feel counterintuitive, save maybe that one rule, like I said. And then lastly, tactics and strategy and luck. There's a lot here of responding to your opponent, you know, or leaving them in a position, like I said, where they don't have a lot to respond to. There's also a few different paths to victory that are interesting. You can just pursue the idea of making one really massive big group and scoring that a few times. Every time you add 1 or 2 flowers to it, boom. You know, you score 3, then you score 6, then you add 2 to that and score 8. That is a really cool concept. Of course, by doing that, you're probably ignoring 2 other things. You're ignoring the honeypot bonus, and you are ignoring the bees around the hives. Or you can go for the hives. I like to do that myself. I collect a lot of these flowers that have the bees on them. I'll score some points from that, likely, from the color of the flower. But then at the end of the game, I make a lot of points from those bees around the hives. And if I'm smart, I can even put a flower out there that scores for multiple hives, right? The trick with that is you're probably playing slower than other people because you are taking a single flower to their 2 or 3 flowers. That's interesting. And then, of course, there's the idea of getting that bonus, that 10 victory point bonus on top. But if you're doing that, that means you have to invest in all the colors, which means you're probably scoring fewer points for each group. It's a neat balance. It's a good grouping of concepts all at odds with one another. So tactically, it's a very rich game. Overall, I really enjoy Queenz. I think this is going to be one that a lot of people out there are going to play. It's going to be one that's good to play with a mixed group, to play with families. This is just a very pleasant and enjoyable game. So this one's going to get a seal of excellence from me. I definitely recommend you give this one a go. Queenz, enjoy some gardening and make sure you're keeping an eye out for those bees. Again, seal of excellence. I'm Zee Garcia, and I'll see you all on the next one.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com.